"Grandpa, watch out, my parents want to take your money." Those quiet words from my 10-year-old grandson, spoken with shaking lips, stopped me cold and turned my world upside down forever. Please stay with me while I share my story, and remember to stand with us by passing it on to those who care about family and fairness. It was supposed to be a happy day. My house was full of noise, children running in the yard, adults talking over one another, the smell of food drifting from the kitchen. I sat on the porch, enjoying the sight, trying to ignore the empty chair beside me where my late wife used to sit. But something felt off. Beneath the laughter, there was a strange heaviness I couldn't quite name. That was when I felt a small tug on my sleeve. I looked down and saw my grandson. Usually, his face was full of life, but now his eyes were wide, darting nervously toward the house. His little hands were clenched tight, and his voice was so low I had to lean in to hear him. "They've been talking about it," he said. "At night. They think you don't need your money anymore. They're going to take it before you can stop them." My first instinct was to laugh it off, to tell him he'd misunderstood. But the fear in his eyes held me still. This wasn't a game or a wild story. My grandson was carrying something heavy, something no child should have to carry. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked softly. "Because you're my grandpa," he whispered. "I don't want them to hurt you." I felt something twist inside me. I wanted to tell him everything would be fine, that he didn't have to worry, but I couldn't lie to him. Instead, I placed a steady hand on his shoulder. "Thank you for telling me. We'll keep this between us for now, all right?" He nodded, then stepped back and disappeared into the crowd of children, pretending nothing had happened. I stayed on the porch, staring at my tea as if it could give me answers. Around me, the reunion carried on, clinking plates, loud conversations, bursts of laughter, but I barely heard any of it. All I could hear was my grandson's small, trembling voice warning me. And deep down, I knew he might be right. That night after the reunion, I couldn't sleep. The house was quiet, but my mind was restless. Every creak of the floorboards and groan of the old pipes felt louder than usual. I sat at the kitchen table with a glass of water, thinking about what my grandson had told me. The more I turned it over in my head, the more little moments from the past few months started to stand out. I remembered my son stopping by unannounced a few weeks earlier. He brought coffee, which was unusual, and sat across from me, asking casual questions that didn't feel so casual. How much did my pension pay these days? Did I still keep my savings at the same bank? Was I sure I was getting the best interest rate? At the time, I thought he was just making conversation. Now, in the light of my grandson's words, it sounded like he'd been fishing for detail. Then there was my daughter-in-law. She had never shown much interest in my bills before, but suddenly she was insisting she could help by taking over the payments. "One less thing for you to worry about," she'd said, smiling too brightly. When I told her I could manage, her smile had faded, just for a second. I'd ignored it then, but now it bothered me. A few days after the reunion, my grandson found me alone in the garden. He didn't speak right away. Instead, he reached into his pocket and handed me a small, crumpled piece of paper. I opened it and saw a short sentence in uneven handwriting. "They said you don't need your money anymore." My throat tightened as I looked at him. "Who said this?" I asked, though I already knew. He glanced toward the house and whispered, "They talk about it when they think I'm asleep." His voice was almost too quiet to hear. I folded the note carefully and slipped it into my wallet. "Thank you," I told him, trying to keep my voice steady. "You've done the right thing." He nodded, but his eyes stayed fixed on the ground. It was clear he'd been holding this inside for a while. That was when I realized this wasn't just about my safety, it was about his too. He was living under the same roof with them, hearing things no child should have to hear, carrying the weight of it alone. From that moment on, I knew I had to be careful. If my son and daughter-in-law were planning something, confronting them outright could make things worse, especially for the boy. I decided to watch and listen instead. I started keeping my important papers locked away in an old metal box. I paid closer attention when they spoke, noting every odd question, every hint of impatience in their voices. I also began making small tests. I left an old checkbook in plain sight on the kitchen counter one day, knowing it had no active account. Later, I noticed it had been moved slightly, as if someone had picked it up and then put it back quickly. I didn't mention it to anyone. The more I watched, the more certain I became that my grandson's warning was real. There was something in the way my son looked at me now, a strange mix of forced cheer and quiet calculation. My daughter-in-law had started dropping hints about how hard it was to make ends meet, almost as if she wanted me to feel guilty for living comfortably. I kept my face calm and my words polite, but inside I was planning. They thought I was just an old man, too slow to notice. They didn't know that I'd been trained to spot danger long before they were born. And now, with my grandson quietly on my side, I was going to find out exactly what they were up to. The next morning, I made a decision. If they thought I was slipping, I'd give them a little more reason to believe. Over breakfast, I forgot where I had put the sugar, even though it was sitting right in front of me. I mixed up the days of the week when talking about a doctor's appointment. My son exchanged a glance with his wife, the kind that says more than words ever could. They didn't comment, but I caught the faint curl of a smile on her lips. I kept it up over the next few days. I'd pause mid-sentence, pretending I'd lost my train of thought. I'd call my son by his brother's name. Small mistakes, just enough to plant the seed. The more I fumbled, the more they relaxed around me, as if they no longer needed to hide their intentions so carefully. Once I felt the act was convincing, I moved to the next step. In the garage, I dug through a box of old electronics until I found a pocket-sized voice recorder I'd used years ago. It still worked. That evening, while my son was outside making a phone call and my daughter-in-law was in the kitchen, I slipped the recorder under the couch cushion where they often sat together at night. I waited. The first evening, I heard nothing unusual when I played it back. They talked about groceries, TV shows, and the weather. But on the third night, I struck gold. I was in my bedroom with the door shut when I pressed play. Their voices came through faintly at first, but then clear enough for every word to land like a blow. "He's getting worse," my daughter-in-law said. "Half the time, he doesn't even know what day it is. We should do this before he completely loses his mind." My son replied, his voice low but firm. "I know. I've been looking into it. If we get power of attorney, we can move the money before the bank asks questions." They spoke casually, as if discussing weekend plan. My son even laughed at one point. Sitting there in the dark, I felt something deep inside me twist. It wasn't just the betrayal. I had seen enough in life to know greed can turn family against each other. What hit harder was knowing my grandson, if he overheard them again, would be listening to his own parents plot against me like I was a burden to be disposed of. I wanted to storm into the living room, slam the recorder down on the table, and demand an explanation. But I forced myself to stay still. Acting too soon could make them cautious, and if they became cautious, I'd lose my chance to stop them properly. Patience had kept me alive in worse situations than this. I reminded myself of that as I rewound the recording and played it again, memorizing every detail, the tone of their voices, the way they lowered them when they said certain words, the small pauses that told me they were thinking about how to pull it off. By the time I turned the recorder off, my course was set. They believed they were closing in. I was going to let them think that, and then, when they felt most secure, I'd be ready. Late one night, I heard soft footsteps outside my bedroom window. Peering through the curtains, I saw my grandson standing in the backyard, holding a small flashlight under his chin. His face looked pale and serious, the kind of look that belongs to children who carry secrets too heavy for their age. I opened the door quietly and motioned for him to come inside. He didn't say anything at first, just shuffled his feet nervously. Finally, he spoke in a whisper. "Grandpa, I'm scared. What if Mom and Dad find out I told you? What if they get angry?" I knelt down to his level and looked into his eyes. "Hey, you did the right thing coming to me. You're safe here with me. No matter what happens, I'll protect you." He nodded slowly but didn't relax completely. "I don't want to cause trouble. I just want you to be safe." We sat on the porch for a while, the quiet night wrapping around us like a blanket. The stars blinked above, but the peace didn't reach his eyes. I could tell the boy had been carrying this burden alone for too long. The next day, I reached out to an old friend, someone I trusted more than anyone else, a retired lawyer who had helped me with things long ago. Over the phone, I explained the situation without going into every detail, careful not to let anything slip. He listened carefully, then gave me advice that surprised me. "Don't confront them just yet," he said firmly. "You need solid proof, something they can't deny. If you act too fast, they might cover their tracks or even harm the boy emotionally. Let the plan unfold so you can catch them red-handed." His words made sense. I didn't want to rush and risk losing everything. The stakes were high, not just for me, but for my grandson. That evening, I sat with the boy again and explained what the lawyer had said. "We have to be patient," I told him. "You keep acting like everything is normal. It's important, but it won't be easy." He looked uncertain, then sighed softly. "Okay, Grandpa, I'll do it. For you." I reached out and squeezed his small hand. "You're stronger than you think, kiddo. We're in this together." From then on, our meetings became quiet moments in the backyard where we could talk in whispers, away from prying ears. He told me things he'd overheard, little details that added pieces to the puzzle. I promised him he wouldn't have to carry this weight alone anymore. At home, I kept a close eye on the house without making it obvious. I watched how my son and daughter-in-law behaved around us, noticing the cracks that started to show as their plan edged closer to execution. But I never let my grandson see the anger or sadness that bubbled inside me. Instead, I focused on giving him small comforts, his favorite snacks, stories from when I was young, little jokes to make him smile. I wanted him to remember that family could still mean something real, even if some grown-ups had forgotten. We both knew the road ahead would be difficult, but at least now the boy had an ally, someone who believed him, someone who would fight for him, no matter what. And that made all the difference. The days that followed were a careful dance of appearances and hidden moves. My son started bringing over papers more often, always with a polite but urgent tone, pressing me to sign forms and agreements. I played along, nodding and muttering just enough to seem agreeable. Behind the calm, my mind was sharp and alert. Thanks to my lawyer friend, I had prepared documents that looked real but held no power. They were designed to stall, giving me time to gather the evidence I needed without raising suspicion. Each time my son handed me a form, I flipped through it quickly, pretending to read carefully before making a slow, deliberate signature. The house filled with quiet tension. My daughter-in-law whispered to my son about the future, vacations they would take, bills they'd finally clear, the new car they planned to buy. Their voices were low but full of excitement, as if they already counted my money as theirs. Through it all, my grandson kept up the act perfectly. He laughed with his parents during meals, played outside with the neighborhood kids, and never let his fear show. But I caught the occasional glance he shot me, a silent plea for strength. Meanwhile, I moved quickly to protect what mattered most. I worked with my lawyer to transfer all my savings into a trust, putting everything under my grandson's name. It was a safeguard, a quiet barrier between my son's reach and my money. I made sure to handle every detail with care, signing papers in the lawyer's office and setting up the trust without my son knowing. The boy was my secret partner in this, even if he didn't understand every part. To gather final proof, I installed small hidden cameras around the main rooms, the living room where we spent most of our time, the kitchen where conversations often happen, and even the hallway where important whispers might take place. I placed the cameras discreetly, behind picture frames, inside a clock, and near lamps. Technology had come a long way since my younger days, and these little devices could capture everything without drawing attention. Each night, I checked the footage carefully, scanning for any sign of the plan moving forward. I stayed alert, knowing that any wrong move could alert my son and daughter-in-law, ruining everything. My grandson and I shared brief moments of quiet reassurance during these days. When the boy felt overwhelmed, I reminded him to focus on the end goal. "We're almost there," I'd say, squeezing his shoulder gently. "Just a little longer." He nodded, holding on to that hope like a lifeline. Inside, I fought a mix of emotions: anger at the betrayal, sadness for the boy caught in the middle, and determination to see this through. I didn't want this to become a story of loss and regret. I wanted to show my grandson that courage and careful planning could overcome even the darkest intentions. As the days passed, the plan in motion felt more real, and the weight of what was coming settled heavy on my shoulders. But beneath it all, a quiet fire burned, a promise to protect what was rightfully ours, no matter the cost. The house may have seemed calm on the surface, but beneath the smiles and whispered schemes, the trap was closing, and I was ready. One quiet afternoon, everything came to a head. My son arrived at the house with his wife, their faces carefully composed but eyes sharp and calculating. Behind them walked a notary, someone I hadn't met before. The presence of this stranger made my stomach twist with unease. They sat me down at the kitchen table and laid out papers before me. My son's voice was smooth, almost gentle as he explained. "These are just in case something happens to you, Grandpa. Medical emergencies. We just want to make sure everything is taken care of." I nodded slowly, keeping my expression calm. Inside, I was bracing myself. I knew exactly what was happening. They were trying to get me to sign away control. But I played along, careful not to show any suspicion. In the hallway, my grandson crouched behind the wall, clutching the small camera I had given him. His hands trembled, the device heavy in his grip. I could see the fear in his eyes, mixed with determination. He was there, capturing every word, every moment. I glanced at the papers again, pretending to read, my fingers lingering over the edges. I acted confused, asking questions I already knew the answers to. "What exactly am I signing here?" I asked, drawing out the moment. My son's smile tightened just a little. "It's just a precaution, Dad. You don't have to worry." But I wasn't fooled. I knew this wasn't about precaution. It was about control, about taking what wasn't theirs to take. After a long pause, I sighed deeply and reluctantly dipped the pen to the paper. My signature was slow and careful, just like the others. All the while, I kept my face neutral, hiding the storm inside. My grandson's lip quivered as he watched from his hiding spot. I could tell he was fighting back tears, biting his lip hard to keep from crying. The weight of betrayal pressed down on him like a stone. His own parents, the people he should trust most, were the ones doing this. When the papers were signed, my son and daughter-in-law exchanged satisfied looks. The notary gathered the documents and left without a word, slipping out as quietly as he had come. After they left, I found my grandson and pulled him close. He didn't speak, but I could feel the trembling in his body. I wrapped my arms around him tightly, letting him know he wasn't alone. That day, the house felt colder. The betrayal wasn't just in the papers I signed. It was in the silence that followed, in the way my grandson's eyes held so much pain. But beneath the hurt, there was also a spark, a promise to keep fighting, to protect what was truly ours. Even in that dark moment, I knew we hadn't lost yet. After the day the papers were signed, I knew it was time to act. I reached out to my old lawyer friend, who had stood by me through every step. Together, we gathered the recordings, the videos from the hidden cameras, and the audio clips of the conversations my son and daughter-in-law had no idea were being captured. We made our way to the police station, the weight of evidence heavy in my briefcase. Sitting across from the officers, I laid out everything we had collected, the proof that my own family had tried to steal from me, using lies and tricks. The police listened carefully, eyes narrowing as they watched the footage of my son and daughter-in-law plotting behind closed doors. There were moments when their faces twisted into greedy smiles, whispering about money that wasn't theirs to claim. The recordings left little room for doubt. The officers agreed to visit my house to confront the accused. I felt a strange mix of anxiety and hope. I wanted justice, but I also worried about what this confrontation would do to my grandson, caught in the middle of it all. When the officers arrived, they approached my son and daughter-in-law with calm professionalism. They asked them to come to the station for questioning, explaining the evidence that had been presented. At first, my son and his wife denied everything. Their voices were steady, faces blank, trying to mask any hint of guilt. But then, an officer pressed play on a small speaker, and the room filled with the unmistakable sound of their own voices, bragging about their plan to take control of my finances, laughing about the trust they thought they could manipulate. The denial faded instantly, replaced by shock and anger. My son's eyes flicked to me, then to the porch where my grandson sat, silent and tense. It was clear to everyone there who had been the real force behind the case. The boy who had the courage to speak out, who had carried the burden alone for so long. Watching from the porch, my grandson's emotions swirled inside him. I could see the relief mixed with sorrow, knowing his actions had brought truth to light but also fractured his family. His parents glared at him, their eyes full of rage and disbelief, understanding too late that their own child had been their undoing. Inside, I felt a mixture of pride and pain. Pride for the boy who had stood up despite fear, and pain for the family torn apart by greed. The neighborhood began to buzz with whispers, news spreading quickly about the betrayal exposed in our quiet home. The officers assured me that the investigation would continue and that they would do everything in their power to protect me and my grandson. It wasn't just about money anymore. It was about safeguarding the future for the boy who had shown such bravery. In the days that followed, I kept a close eye on my grandson. He was quieter now, but I could tell the weight of what had happened rested heavily on him. Still, there was a spark in his eyes, a quiet strength that told me he was ready to face whatever came next. Though the wounds were fresh, we had taken the first steps toward healing. The betrayal had been revealed, and those responsible faced the consequence. Together, we would rebuild what had been broken, one careful step at a time. And in the end, the truth, carried by the smallest voice in the family, had finally found its way into the light. The quiet town didn't stay quiet for long. Word spread like wildfire about what had happened in our family. The story of greed and betrayal wasn't just whispered behind closed doors anymore. It was out in the open for everyone to see. People I had known for years looked at me with a mix of sympathy and disbelief. Some shook their heads, unable to understand how a family could fall apart like this. Others quietly admired the courage it took to stand up against those closest to you. My son paid the heaviest price. Almost overnight, he lost his job. His employer, hearing the news and seeing the evidence, decided it was best to let him go. There was no room for someone who'd tried to deceive his own father. The man who had once been proud and confident suddenly found himself stripped of his position and respect. It was a harsh fall, but it was one he had brought on himself. His wife's family didn't stand by her either. When news of their part in the scheme reached them, they cut ties. Invitations stopped coming, calls went unanswered, and the warmth of family support turned cold and distant. The daughter-in-law, once so sure of her plans, found herself isolated, left to face the consequences without the comfort of her relative. Amid all this chaos, the most fragile member of our family needed a safe place to stay. My grandson was sent to live with me while the legal battles dragged on. The boy, who had carried such a heavy secret on his small shoulders, arrived at my home looking exhausted and scared. His usual bright eyes were shadowed by worry and sadness. I tried my best to comfort him, but some wounds aren't easy to heal. One afternoon, as he sat on the porch with his knees pulled to his chest, tears finally spilled over. His voice was soft but full of pain as he said, I just wanted you to be safe, Grandpa. The honesty of those words broke through every wall I had built around my own. I reached out and pulled him into a tight embrace, feeling the weight of his fear and love all at once. You saved me, kiddo, I whispered, holding him close. It was the truth. Without his warning, without his courage to speak up, none of this would have come to light. In the days that followed, we settled into a quiet routine. I could see the boy slowly starting to breathe easier, knowing he was no longer alone. The house, once filled with tension and secrets, began to feel more like a home again. We spent evenings talking quietly, sometimes sitting in silence, just enjoying each other's company. Though the past still cast a long shadow, there was a sense of hope growing between us. My grandson began to smile more, and I found myself smiling back, grateful for the chance to protect and care for him. We both knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. There were still legal battles to fight, family ties to untangle, and wounds to heal. But for now, we had each other, and that made all the difference. In this small town where everyone had an opinion and no secret stayed hidden for long, our story was one of loss and betrayal, yes, but also of love and resilience. The boy who had once been frightened and alone was becoming stronger every day, and I was proud to be by his side as we faced whatever came next. We were survivors, and together, we would find a way forward. After everything that had happened, I knew I had to take clear, decisive steps to protect what was left of my family and my legacy. The betrayal ran too deep for forgiveness. Not yet, at least. I sat down with my lawyer friend to update my will, making sure the man who tried to steal from me would be completely cut out. There was no place for him in my plans anymore. Instead, I made sure my grandson was the sole heir. The house, my savings, everything would belong to him. I wanted him to have a safe future, free from the shadows that had darkened his childhood. Naming him guardian of the house was more than just a legal decision. It was a symbol of trust, a way of showing him that he was now the center of my world. Along with the changes to the will, I wrote a letter to the court. It was difficult to put my feelings into words, but I needed to tell the story, not just as a matter of fact, but as a testament to the boy's bravery. I spoke about how he had carried a secret no child should bear, how he had stood quietly in the face of fear and danger to protect his grandfather. The letter wasn't just a legal formality. It was a tribute to the courage and strength of the child who had saved me. When my son tried to come back, to apologize for what he'd done, I didn't have the heart to accept his words. His apology felt empty, like a bandage over a wound too fresh to heal. I looked him in the eye and said simply, "A man protects his family. You failed yours." Those words hung heavy between us, unspoken truths that no apology could erase. My grandson, on the other hand, began to relax in ways I hadn't seen before. For months, he had lived with a quiet tension, carrying the weight of secrets and fear. But now, as the legal matters settled and the house truly became his home, I saw something new. There was a calm in his eyes, a sense of safety that had been missing for far too long. We started to rebuild not just the house, but our lives together. I made sure the boy had everything he needed: books to read, a place to play, and most importantly, my unwavering support. We talked openly, sharing stories and laughter, slowly knitting back the trust that had been broken. The betrayal was a scar, yes, but it was also a lesson, one I hoped my grandson would carry with him as he grew. Trust is fragile, but love, when it is real, can endure even the hardest trials. He had shown me that love in ways no one else could. Though the past still lingered like a shadow, the future looked brighter. The house was filled with new memories, not haunted by greed, but warmed by the bond between a grandfather and his brave grandson. Together, we faced what was next, not as victims, but as survivors, standing strong in the face of betrayal, ready to protect each other no matter what. Years passed, and the story that once shook our family slowly spread beyond the walls of our small town. What began as a personal tragedy grew into something much larger, a lesson about the dangers of greed, the cost of betrayal, and the power of standing up for what is right. People started to see our experience as a cautionary tale, one that warned others to be careful with whom they trust, especially when it comes to family. My grandson, who had been just a scared boy back then, grew into a man shaped by those hard lessons. He carried the weight of those early years with quiet strength, but instead of letting it break him, he chose to use it to help others. He began speaking at community events, sharing his story with anyone who would listen. His voice was steady and clear, filled with conviction as he talked about courage, honesty, and the importance of protecting what matters most, even when doing so is difficult. At those gatherings, I sat in the front row, watching him closely. There was a pride in my heart that words can't fully capture. The boy who had once hidden in fear was now a man standing tall, inspiring others with his words and actions. Seeing him grow into someone so brave and compassionate made all the pain and struggle worth it. He wasn't just my grandson anymore. He was a beacon of hope for many. The community began to understand that family isn't just about blood ties. It's about trust, respect, and love. They saw how my grandson's loyalty and courage helped heal a family torn apart by greed. And they learned that sometimes the hardest battles are fought not on distant fields or in courtrooms, but within the walls of our own homes. One evening, after one of his speeches, we sat together on the porch, the same porch where so much had changed over the years. The sun was setting, painting the sky with soft colors that matched the peace I felt inside. We didn't need many words between us. Just sitting side by side, safe and sound, said everything. I looked over at him and smiled, knowing that the journey we'd been through had made us stronger. He turned to me and said quietly, "Blood may make you family, but love makes you a home." Those words stayed with me, simple yet powerful, capturing the heart of everything we had endured and overcome. As the evening settled into night, the porch light cast a warm glow around us. The house behind us no longer felt like a place marked by pain, but a home filled with love and hope. The story we shared had become more than just our past. It was a promise for the future. A reminder that no matter what happened, love is the foundation that holds us together. And in that moment, I knew we were finally safe at last. Do you think I made the right choice by cutting my son out of my life and trusting my grandson instead? Or do you feel I should have given them another chance? I really want to hear what you think. Please share your thoughts in the comments. And if you'd like to hear more stories like mine about family, trust, and difficult decisions, be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss what's coming next.